Hey, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining today's Code Without Barriers virtual meetup. Today's topic for this session is on security concepts in Azure. So we have a special guest, Deepthi Gauri, who is today's speaker, and she is a Microsoft MVP and a certified trainer as well. She is going to be taking us through the topic and help us understand the security concepts. So before we get into the session, I just want to mention that the session is recorded and there is a certificate of participation at the end of the session. And also, since this is a Code Without Barriers virtual meetup, I'll be sharing a little bit more about our links in the Code Without Barriers, where you guys can check out what Code Without Barriers is offering for the women in Asia Pacific, and how you can make uh, best out of what they are offering, the challenges and mentorships and all the job opportunities that they are bringing through Code Without Barriers. You can check out their website, which I'll share in the chat box, and you can sign up for those who are women who have joined us today. If you have any queries regarding that, feel free to let us know in the chat box. And yeah, that's basically everything that I wanted to say. And we have our Deepthi waiting for the sessions to be getting started. And I just want to introduce her, and she'll introduce more about herself and dive into the session. Over to you, Deepthi.
Thank you so much, Suraj. That is a great introduction. And I'm so happy to be here. And thank you so much for inviting me to present. And thank you for each one of you who wanted to join today. I know it's Friday evening for you. Instead of like having a beer party at some bar or like enjoying with friends, you wanted to learn something new, which is like amazing. And thank you so much to be here listening to me. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Um, Give me a minute. All right.
We can see it clearly.
Okay. Awesome. And you can hear me clearly, right?
Yes.
Awesome. So, welcome everybody. My name is Deepthi Gogori, and today I would like to present on the topic security concepts in Azure. So, basically, what to expect from this session is like because you are going to hear me speak about this topic for next 1 hour. I would like to tell you what to expect. If you are like new to Azure or like if you are trying to learn what all things Azure can offer and especially based upon the security, right? So I'm going to present this session to give an overview of what all options we have and how we can actually set up couple of things. So um, if you are already working on Azure platform, which I'm sure so many people might be already working on, this will give you a detailed overview of the security concept. So I'm sure you will be learning, if you already know everything, you will be learning one or two things new. So yeah, let's get started. A little bit about me. Suraj has already told a couple of things, but um, I'm going to say a couple of things here. I'm also a co-organizer for a couple of user groups. I'm a co-organizer for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion user group, Microsoft Data in AI South Florida user group, Data TGIF, and also I'm a co-organizer for one of the biggest conference in United States, Future Data Driven Summit, which is a part of cloud data driven user group. So all of these user groups that I'm talking are virtual on Meetup. So if you can register on meetup.com, it's you can register free for me. Like go to the meetup.com, open your website and search for Azure user groups. That's where you'll find all of these user groups, virtual user groups. You can register and then attend all the free webinars that we'll be having every week. So, yeah, I am also a volunteer for Data Platform Women in Technology user group. And apart from my work and my community work and my work, I love arts and crafts and a little bit of philosophy as well. And if you have any questions regarding this session and you are shy to ask here, please do not hesitate to contact me on LinkedIn. Um, I'm I'm very active on LinkedIn, and I have my own website, dbanuggets.com, where I usually blog about Azure and SQL Server topics. So I'm also available on Twitter, though many people are going away from Twitter. I'm still there. So let's start with an analogy. I love analogies. I love how we can align that analogy with the technical topic. So I have put something here. Let's start with a bank robbery analogy. Let's say a thief who wanted to rob the bank, like what kind of steps he need to take and how like banks are we save money in banks, right? And banks needs to be protected as much as possible, all the way starting from the parking lot, the security cameras, and each step as we move ahead and until we enter the money vault, there are like different layers of security built in place. So let's say a, a robbery, one person want to rob the bank, and what layers he have to break to reach that money vault. First, no matter which side he will enter into the bank, he have to pass through the cameras from the parking lot. Everywhere there are cameras, right? Let's say he saw the blind spots and then he entered somehow to the door, and then he need to have the main lock, right? Main lock, it can be any lock, it can be digital lock or it can be a physical lock. He need to break that somehow, and even after he broke that and enter into the, let's say there was a little collective box we have that we get when we want to put some money or like cash or um, gold or something like that, the valuables. If he want to break that, he need to have the physical key even for that, or even after breaking the main lock, right? And there are more and more digital locks coming in, and he like digital locks have multi-factor authentication enabled these days. Like they can try 2 to 3 times, but for the third time the call will directly go to the 911 if you are in United States, or it will go to the police officer call, like police station calls to them that something is going on with the bank during the middle of the night. So it is very hard for a person who want to rob the bank to actually enter into the vault. To break that vault itself, you need to have so much of access, right, to touch the money. So this guy, he tried multiple he tried the digital locks, he tried with passcodes, but he couldn't break. But then the call went to 911 already, and now this guy is under the bus because uh, they're already coming to catch him, right? So, what did you observe here? You observe something which is obvious, that there is like several layers of security. Even if the guy passes through the camera somehow using the blind spots, he have to break the locks. If not physical locks, he have to break the digital locks. And when he tried to break the digital lock, the call went to the security. Now police are here. That is an additional security, right? Even before touching the actual money. So here, the money, when we wanted to compare, right, the money is our data. So if we compare that to the security in Azure, we have several layers of security that anybody have to hit before touching the customer data. So when we compare with our analogy, the network security, the first layer of security, the toppest layer of security is a network security. It's like the cameras that you have seen in the previous analogy. That's the network security, right? Next level of security, access management, threat protection, information protection, and then the customer data. So a person who want to break down the system and want to reach to the customer data in Azure, he have to break all of these layers. So if you have the question like, is my data secure? Yes, it is secure. By default, there are several options that are already enabled in Azure that will keep your customer data secure. But it is also up to you who are building your Azure SQL databases or like managed instances in Azure. You have a part to be played in if your databases and data is in Azure. So today we are going to talk each of these layer in detail. So what to expect, right? So we are, as you see, we have seen these different layers of security. We are going to talk about each one of these layer today. Now let's start with the network security, right? Do not get overwhelmed with the slide. I will make it simple for you. So there are in the network security, there are four different options we have, right? All the way from left side to the right side. So left side is the least secure options. As you move from left side to right side, it makes your data more secure. So let's start with the least secure ones. Allow access to Azure services. This is like a single click. Say yes or no to it. It's like a single tick mark that you can click in Azure. So once you click on allow access to Azure services, then anything within Azure can connect. Any services within Azure can connect to your database. But your on-prem servers cannot connect to your Azure database. This is only within the Azure services can connect. And you will get a public IP address. And when you do the NS lookup on your database, as this is having public IP address, you will see all the information like where the database is hosted, what region it is hosted, what is the control ring information, and all the information is visible, which is least secure. Now you may be thinking, now, if it is least secure, why is it even in place, right? They can remove, right? The Azure, Microsoft can just let it go, right? But the thing is, sometimes within Azure, if you are building something like in a database and you want to connect your applications very quickly without having to deal with rest of these complicated network security, without even having to talk to the networking guy and everybody to be in place and getting the approvals everywhere. You quickly want to build a database, connect your application, test a few things, and then drop the database. This is only testing purposes, and you are testing something. That's when you can leverage this allow access to Azure services because it is very easy. Just one click, your all your Azure services within Azure can connect to your database, and it is only like for the development purposes and for testing purposes. But it is not suggestible at all to put that in any of your environment, dev, test, QA, or production, right? Keep that in your mind. So the next thing, the next layer is firewall rules. So if you are a DBA or developer, I'm sure you know what is firewall rules. Like you don't have to technically know what it is, but you might be hearing here and there that people are like, "Hey, this broke because there was no firewall rule set in place." So that was the reason we couldn't able to connect. Now we have to go ahead and um, uh, talk to the security guy to open up a firewall rule and um, submit a ticket on that, right? Those sort of things you might be hearing. So, just like the way you create a firewall rule on your on-prem SQL server, it is the same way you open up the firewall rule in the Azure to your on-prem SQL server. So you'll open up the firewall rule for the each of the machine that is trying to connect to your Azure SQL database. And here you will be having a public IP address as well. There is no private IP address here. You will only get public IP address. And when you do the NS lookup, you will still have the region information where the database is hosted and controlling information. Everything is accessible here. Still not secure, right? Next option is virtual network rules. So this is a little bit more secure than firewall rules and little less secure than the private link, right? Um, what you will do here is you will just create one network rule on a virtual network where you are connecting to your Azure SQL database. So if you build a Azure SQL database on a virtual network, you will be creating this rule on that particular virtual network. And if you have multiple virtual networks, all of these virtual networks should be connected to this little virtual network where your database is hosted. That's where you will be creating your virtual network role, one virtual network role. And here you will be having private IP address within that particular virtual network where your database is hosted. That's where you will be creating this virtual network rule, right? But still, when you do the NS lookup, your information like region information, control ring information is still open and it is visible. So it's still not secure. Now, if you want to put everything in place, the security in place properly, full-fledged, right? You need to create a private endpoint, which is the last option known as private link, where you will be creating a private endpoint. You will be creating a private endpoint on the database itself, and that private endpoint, um, everything that wanted to connect to the database should go through that private endpoint only. And here, there will be complete blockage of the internet access. There will be totally blockage, right? You can't access to the internet. Only services that have the connectivity access to that private endpoint will have access to the database. And we have the private IP address here. And when you do the NS lookup, you everything is secure here. It shows the private endpoint. Now, what I'm even talking about, right? Let's see what I'm talking about, like the network security on Azure. Now, if you do not have Azure portal, you will get a $200 credit for free for 1 month, I believe. You can open up a free account to play with it, with all of these things, right? So here we have security demo SQL Server, right? Underneath that, we are talking about security today. So underneath the security, the first layer is network security, right? We have to click on that to see all of these options that we just talked about. So underneath the firewall rules, um, you have number one, which is like allow Azure services and resources to access this server. So when you click on that, anything in Azure, all the services in Azure can connect to your database, not secure, right? So I uncheck that. I do not want that, but then I would like to add the IP address of my local server, IP address here. If you see the number two over with the arrow mark, that's where I added the IP address of my local server. That's when that's how we will be creating the firewall rule. And then I'll click save so that my local computer can be able to access. Now I can go ahead and click connect to the server, right? Um, connect connect from my local server to Azure. So from my local machine management studio, SSMS management studio, I tried to connect to the Azure SQL database, and I was able to connect because I added the IP address here. Now, let's see how we create the private endpoint, right? That's the most secure option. If you see the top highlighted one, that's a virtual network rule, how to create the virtual network rule. But just let's just directly jump into the creating the private endpoint. So here I have already created a private endpoint. It's still underneath this networking plate, right? We need to click on networking, go to the private access, the second tab. The first tab will contain um, um, all the previous options that we saw, but the third one, private access, will show you how to create the endpoint. I already created that, so I will click on that to show you like what all. Let me see, did I miss something here? Um, yeah, I have one more slide here that it is missing, but so to create a private endpoint, it is very easy. You need to know on which virtual network you are creating this endpoint, right? We are creating the uh, private endpoint on the same virtual network where your database is hosted. So you'll be creating that. You need to have that information, right? And then your subscription details and like all of those details, like and the resource group, where do you want to place this? That's all. Now, what I will do is once you created that private endpoint, how will it show when you are trying to connect to the database and access the database? How will it show? Will it show the details or like will it show the private IP address? Now I connected to the virtual network where my database is hosted, right? I connected there and I try to run this particular query, select client net address from sysdm execute connections where session ID is bit, and it gave me 10.0.0.7. Now if I go ahead and see the details of where this IP address is coming from on my virtual, I'll connect to my virtual machine, right, where I hosted the Azure SQL database. I connected to that virtual machine and I see the private IP address. It shows the private IP address 10.0.0.7. It did not show the public IP address. If you see, it will not show that information at all. So that's how the private endpoint will work. It will not give any information to the client. Now let's talk about the next layer of security, identity and access management. So when you talk about the identity and access management, it's all about whom we are giving permissions to access your Azure portal or any resources within Azure portal, and what objects are you giving them the access to, um, right? That comes under the authorization. So authentication is always about I try to log in into the Azure portal. I try to get the access to all these resources that I want to access. Now, how will I get the access? When I try to log in, I know that I have the access, but Azure wanted to make sure that I am the right person that is trying to access the database or like any other resources within Azure. That's authentication, and it is managed by multi-factor authentication. I'm 100% sure that you already know what it is. When you try to access to Azure, you will get a authentication code that you need to type on your phone, and once you type in the code and hit approve, that's when you will be able to log into your Azure portal and see any resources. That's authentication, that you are proving that you are the right user accessing the resources. And underneath the authentication, you will also have the type of logins that you can create on these um, Azure SQL as well as managed instance. If you are using Azure SQL and managed instance, it will support SQL authentication as well as Azure Active Directory authentication only. I know we call it as intra ID now, but I would like to use Azure Active Directory authentication, which is same as like intra ID. And if you are using Azure SQL and managed instance, you can also choose only intra ID authentication only, which will not allow SQL authentication. But you have two options. You can choose what you want. And if you are building an Azure SQL database, the first thing that you build is a logical server where you can try to connect to your database. That's how you connect, right? You will be also giving the details of the logical server where you can connect to. So while you are creating this logical server, you need to give the authentication ID and password, which is a SQL authentication ID and password. That authentication ID and password, that ID and password will become the server level principal. It will become the server admin. And when you are building the managed instance, um, that that account where you are building the managed instance, you will have that account will have the sysadmin server role. When you talk about the authentication, authorization, it is all about controlling the access to the resources, like who will be having the access to the database roles, custom roles, and tables, views, functions, all of those objects within your database. That comes under the authorization. That is the difference between authentication and authorization. And with the authorization, you can also, based upon the principle of least privilege, you can give the row level security as well with on your data. Now, I mentioned that while building the logical server, you have to give the SQL ID and password, and that will become the server admin. This is what I'm talking about. DG test server is my logical server where I have placed my Azure SQL database. So While I was building this logical server, I have given the ID Deepti and the password that will automatically become the server admin. There are also role-based access control, meaning who can and cannot be who can and cannot be done on the resources within Azure. Like you might be having multiple resources on Azure, and based upon this role-based access control, there are three default roles that we have, um, where you can go ahead and give the users the access to your resources at the resource level, all the way until the resource group subscription, and the resources that are in, like, any resources that you place underneath this subscription, right? There are three default roles: owner, contributor, and reader role. Owner will have everything they can read, modify, and assign. Contributor role can read and modify, but they cannot assign other users as a contributor or reader. They cannot do anything. All they can do is read and modify. Reader can only read the resources, right? So these permissions can be inherited all the way from the subscription to your database level. So to access these role-based access control, you will go to the logical. Again, we are talking about Azure SQL database here, right? Underneath the logical server, DG test server, where my database is hosted, you need to click on access control, IAM, and then you need to add role assignment to see all of these default roles, role-based access control, right? Click on add role assignment, which will show you the owner, contributor, and reader. There are also other built-in roles in place, but these are the three main ones that we are talking about today. And apart from that, you have the logins, users, and what is the difference between managed instance and the Azure SQL database. So, if we talk about the managed instance, you will be able to create the Azure Intra ID server admin. You can create the SQL or add like Azure Intra ID logins, like we discussed in the previous slide. But also you can create the logins and associated database users. But also on the top of it, you can also create the contained users. Let's say you have a managed instance and you have 20 databases on it, and you just don't want to create the login, but just you want to have a user directly connected to the database instead of them having the login. That's what they call as contained users. These users will have direct access to the database. As per the roles that you assign to them, they can see the database. They can't see any other databases, or like they can't have the login. With the Azure SQL database, again you can have the Azure Intra ID server admin, as well as, here is the difference, right? You can build the SQL logins just like the managed instance, but with the Azure SQL database, you can have separate login manager roles, DB manager roles, just to make sure you have limited server admins, to limit the server admins. But then these login manager and DB manager can have a proper access without giving them the server admin permissions. These are the additional ones. And you can create the database users as well, which contains the logins for them, associated logins. But also you can create the contained users which do not have logins but access to the database, including the Azure Intra ID users as well. So to create any new logins or like database users on Azure SQL database, you need to remember that you can only do that if you are login through the Azure Entra ID server admin only. Like if you are a part of SQL login, but you have the permissions on SQL login, you can't create any logins. You have to be signing in as Azure server admin only to do that. Let's talk the interesting part, data encryption. So under the data encryption, we have couple of options here, right? Um, the first one is encryption in transit. Now, the data, while the data is being moved from the database to the application and from the application to the database, the data needs to be protected. So, encryption in transit is always by default enabled, and it is enabled by transparent layer security, which is known as TLS. Now, this TLS, um, you are enforced to, you can't disable that because it is enabled by default. But you need to make sure that this TLS version that you are choosing is up to date version, because constantly these TLS versions, older versions, will be deprecated and won't be in use. And if you do not change the TLS version to the updated version, um, and that application that you are trying to connect to the database needs to have that aligned with this TLS version. This TLS version should be supported by your application. If they are not supported, then your connections will break. So you need to make sure the TLS version is up to date, as well as that TLS version is supported by your application. Two things, right? The next one is encryption at rest. Encryption at rest is totally about the data on your drives. Not only the data files, not only the log files, but backup files, all of them. Everything should be encrypted at rest as well. Again, it is always encrypted. It is enabled by default by transparent data encryption. We are going to talk about that in the coming slides. And encryption in use. Not only the data while in transit and while it is being encrypted at rest, but it should also be encrypted while in use, meaning while it is being executed, while the queries are being executed, the data needs to be protected as well. So how does this happen, right? By using something known as data enclaves. It is also always encrypted by default. Um, we are going to talk about that encryption in use in the next slides. So, like I mentioned, encryption in transit, the TLS option always needs to be updated, and you will get the notification from Microsoft in these TLS versions are um, outdated and deprecated. Ahead of time, you will be getting those alerts as well, so that you make sure, like, you talk to the application admins and align with them to change this TLS version. Again, this is always encrypted by default. You cannot turn it off. And all that you need to make sure that encrypted connection from application is always turned on, not off. Because if you turn it off, and if the TLS version is always turned on in the Azure SQL database, that's when you'll see the disconnectivity from your application to your database. So make sure this option, encrypted connection from application, is always turned on. Now I talked a lot in the slides in words, lot of words, right? Now let's see where this thing hosted on Azure. Now when you connect to the Azure portal, again, DG test server is my logical server under the networking blade. This time we have seen the public access and the private access tabs for the network security, but we need to go to the connectivity to see this TLS version. So go to the connectivity, encryption in transit. Underneath the encryption in transit, you see minimum TLS version. So you can click on the latest version there, but the TLS version 1.0, 1.1, those are the deprecated ones. So they keep on changing and upgrading. That's where you can select the latest one. And encryption at rest is always about the encryption about the data files, log files, um, while the database while the data is pulled out of these data files, um, they have to be also encrypted, right? So it's a real-time encryption because the data is moving in real time. So it will decrypt while pulling the data out of the drives, and then while placing it on the disk again, if you're doing any inserts, that's when it will be saved on the drive and then gets encrypted. Again, it is enabled by default. But here are the two things that you need to remember. Encryption at rest can be done in two ways, right? The default way is Microsoft managed keys. You can manage your data, which is encrypted and at rest, by clicking on Microsoft managed key option, where if you click this option, Microsoft will be managing the keys rotation, and everything. Once you click on this, you can take it easy because these keys will be rotated automatically. But the second option is where, like, when your applications are really sensitive, um, when you have critical databases that you can't take risk, that's when you will bring your own key, and you'll be saving these keys in the key vault within Azure. Um, so once you bring your own keys, you can upload the keys which you have already to the Azure, and you can save them on the key vault. But the thing here is, um, the key generation, like how do you generate these keys, how do you rotate these keys, whom to whom you want to give these keys the access, everything is in your plate. You need to take care of this. You need to be very careful while updating the updating these keys as well, rotating these keys, because for a single rotation, like if you want to rotate a key, right, and that key is being used in multiple location in your services, Azure services, you need to you need to have a calls with the application team. You need to make sure when they are okay to have this maintenance done, because once you have that maintenance set up in schedule, you can rotate the password and then you can go ahead and update the password in the within that application. You might be having just one place to change, or if you're if it is a, if it is a critical one and using in multiple places, which is not suggestible. But if you are using, sometimes you can't avoid, right? If you have to update that in multiple places, you need to have some downtime, so maintenance time, so that you can update in those locations as well. So that's on your plate in bring your own key. So now we wanted to see what we are talking. So underneath the security demo, SQL Server, um, you need to go to the security blade. We are seeing the transparent data encryption, right? So underneath the transparent data encryption, you have two options: the service managed key and the customer managed key. Service managed key managed by Microsoft. Let's talk about the customer managed key, which requires a couple of additional steps to do because we are managing, right? And then select on the key selection method. How do you want to select a key? Now, I would like to change a key here, but I would also like to show you how we have to create a key in the first place and store it in the key vault. Now, first, you need to have a key vault, right? Key vault in place so that you can create the keys and save it here. Very easy to build and also very cheap. You can create as many key vaults as you can, and then you can manage based upon how many clients you have, and based upon the application criticality, you can divide these key vaults, and then you can save only specific keys in them. So search in Azure on the top search bar, key vault, click on that and give your subscription details and the resource group, subscription ID details where you want to save this, and then hit create. It will automatically it will automatically create within few seconds. Now I would like to go ahead and create a key. So underneath the objects, left side the blade, click on keys. Now I already created two keys, but I would like to show you how to what all information you need to create these keys. So I would like to select on one of these key, which is security demo one, right? While I was creating this key, it automatically gave the current version. That code that you are seeing, it is automatically created. And the details that you really need is the activation date and the expiration date. Remember, this is bringing your own keys. You need to have those expiration dates so that you can come in here later and then rotate the keys. As I expand, um, if you are seeing all the details here, The key type, RSA key type, these are automatically generated. The only thing that you need to remember here is to set the activation date and set the expiration date. And at the same time, you can enable or you can disable options, and you can also add permitted operations. You can also add some permissions here, like encrypt, decrypt options here, like the operations here. And once you create that key, you can also give the permissions to that key. Like for example, if you're seeing here the highlighted one, the key permissions, unwrap the key, wrap the key. I have given the permissions to my account here, the user. So like that, you can add multiple users who need access to this. And that is under the access policies, right? Underneath the access policies, underneath the key vault, you can give those access. And then now you go back, we have created a key and saved the key in the keyboard, right? Now we come again to the server and then go to the security, transparent data encryption. That's where now I would like to select the key. Now underneath the key, click on change key and then choose the key. Now as you created the key, you can see it from the drop down which key vault you would like to choose and which key you wanted to choose. And then select the version. Again, this version, you need to create a new version once this gets expired, right? Because you are bringing your own key. Select the key and then click on select and then click on save so that you have enabled the transparent data encryption by bringing your own key. Now let's talk about encryption in use. Now this is all about the operations, the queries that you run while the queries are retrieving the data or writing the data, executing the store procedures. While the process is happening within the processor, SQL engine processor, the data needs to be protected, right? This is a client-side encryption technology. Data gets encrypted and decrypted from the client side. Um, from the DB side, data is always encrypted, but there is something known as client driver that will encrypt the data sent from the application to the DB. Now, within this slide, there is something known as secure enclaves. And the important thing that you need to remember here is the middle drive, right? The SQL client drive that you have, that drive will actually encrypt and decrypt the data while the data is being moved from the database client to the database engine and from the database engine to the database client. And this secure enclave will happen within the database engine as it delegates the operations on the encrypted data to the enclave where the data can be easily decrypted and processed. And on what queries, lot of words here, but this enclave will make sure the data is secure while it is still being processed. That part you need to remember, data enclave. And on what type of queries that this enclaves will be beneficial, right? That it uses. The patterns, like for example, if you are using like operator, range queries like less than, greater than, if you are seeing in the slide, in the middle part of this slide, bottom part of this slide, you can see there like patterns matching. When you use the like operator, range queries, greater than, less than, sorting, indexing on those operators, these enclaves will be able to encrypt the data. Now, as we are talking about the encryption at rest, we need to also focus on now data is already encrypted in rest while it is at rest on my drives. That part I'm okay, but which is automatically enabled. But what about if I want to encrypt the data at the column level? I have SSNs, I have PII data that many people should not have access to. That's when the dynamic data masking will come in place, right? Now you can access this underneath the database because this is a data related operation, dynamic data masking. So underneath the database, you have the security as well. Now, if you are closely observing the slides from the beginning, We are accessing the server as well as we are accessing the database. I saw a hand raise. Um, Suraj, can you give the user the access to ask the question? Or I can,
Yeah, I just provided the access.
I mean, like if you don't want to speak, that's fine. You can put the question in the chat window. We can talk once the session is completed, if that is okay.
Yeah, we can. There are some questions in chat box. We can take it at the end of the session.
Sure, thank you. So we have seen the security blade from the server perspective, as well as when you click on the database, underneath the database also, we see the security blade, right? So as this is the dynamic data masking, we have to click on the database and go to the security blade, click on dynamic data masking. That's when you can go ahead and add a mask. So once you add a mask, it will ask you on what schema or like what table you wanted to create this mask. And once you choose the column, it will automatically provide you the mask function based upon the data automatically. And then you can create the dynamic data masking on your columns this way in Azure. Now let's talk about the threat protection and detection. This is all about like um, whether your data, whether your data is um, accessible by any other person who is trying to connect from a different location, those sort of things. There are options here, which is Azure Defender, SQL Auditing, and Azure Security Center. Underneath the Azure Defender, you have two options, which is SQL Vulnerability Assessment and SQL Threat Detection. And SQL Vulnerability Assessment is all about like once you build your database, and if you want to enable this option, right, Azure Defender, SQL Vulnerability Assessment will go ahead and assess your data, how you have actually built your Azure SQL database based upon the standards of Azure. If there are any vulnerabilities that it compared with the standards of Azure, and if it sees like, no, 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 this option needs to be disabled, that is a standard from Azure, that will show you like that thing will actually give you the alert saying that, hey, you need to turn it off if you like, if you wish to. That is the vulnerability assessment. SQL threat detection is the same way. Like once you enable the Azure Defender, it will also um, monitor for any threats. If somebody else is trying to access your data from a different location, you'll get an alert. Those sort of things. It will detect those sort of things, and you can audit your data specifically like you just like it's just like the auditing that you have for the on-prem servers. You can also do that thing here. Azure Security Center is like a it's like a centralized location where you can actually see this threat protection, like all these data that you have gathered. It's a central location. So let's talk about Azure Defender. Again, I'm connecting to the logical server here underneath the auditing. You can find it on the left side blade underneath the security again. Auditing, click on auditing, and once you enable Microsoft Defender for SQL, again, if you see the cost, there is a cost associated with this. While I was preparing this presentation, it is like $15 USD per server per month. So once you enable that, it will ask you for the subscription details and a storage account where you would like to store this data, and periodic recurring scans. I turned it on, and it will show you how frequent it will run, and send the scan reports to your DBA admins. Like if you have accounts, like if you are a DBA, or like if you want to give a specific account, you can give that and hit OK, hit save. And once you hit save, we need to allow for certain amount of time to go ahead and collect the data. I have given at least like about like 30 minutes or so to grab the data. It have given me the recommendation, 6 recommendations underneath the Microsoft Defender for Cloud. And I clicked on view additional recommendations in Defender for Cloud. I have seen some recommendation here, which I see severity level high, low, medium, but I would like to see in detail. So I clicked on view additional recommendations. And under the recommendations, if you see here, it have given several things. Some of them are red, says like active items, recommendations 14 by 14 out of 27. And there are some insights which I see green and red. I would like to mostly focus on red and look into each one of them. Now, I clicked on one of them, like I can access from the server at the server level because I'm here accessing through the logical server, right? At the logical server level, you have the Defender. You can click on that and see these details, or you can actually connect it to the database itself underneath that logical server, but also see the same data. Microsoft Defender for Cloud at the database level, right? And there are 3 findings here. I would like to view all recommendations in Defender for Cloud. Once I click on that at the database level, I have seen vulnerability assessments here. And 2 of them have high severity and 1 of them low. Now, if you see the ID is like, it's like automatically created these IDs. These are IDs generated by Azure based upon their standards. And the security check, it have um, there are 3 of them here. The first one is database owners are as expected, but it gave me the severity level. Let's see what it is. Once I clicked on that, it says like database owners are as expected, but then it says like this is not in the baseline as per the Azure. Remove the unnecessary database owners to avoid granting excessive permissions or update the baseline or to reflect the approved list of owners. But sometimes, I would like to make multiple people as owners and I would like to ignore this. You can either add all the results as a baseline or like remove all from the baseline based upon your needs, right? You can do that. Now let's talk about auditing. Auditing, you can just turn it on. Seek like DG test server is a logical server again at the server level. I would like to click on auditing and like enable Azure SQL auditing here. It will track the database events and writes them to the audit log in your Azure storage account, or if you choose the logical analytical workspace. If you have a log analytical workspace, you can click on that, but you can create one newly here if you do not have one. And you need to give the subscription details. And also the last option at the bottom of the screen is really important to remember. Enable auditing of Microsoft support operations. You can either turn it on or off, but I highly suggest to turn it on because if you're having some kind of issue within Azure SQL database and if you're calling Microsoft support to fix that issue, they need to have the access to these logs. They first do is they request your logs. So if you turn it on, that's when they can access these logs. But if you turn it off, they don't have access. Um, and also you can view these logs at the database level. Go to the auditing again, view audit logs, click on that. And once you click on that, it will ask you if you want to see it as a dashboard, view dashboard. And underneath the dashboard, I saw Azure SQL Security Insights. I would like to click on that to see more. So once I click on that, SQL Security Insights, I have a couple of more options here. But we are focusing on auditing. The rest of the things we'll see in the next slides. But first, we are going to look at this audit distribution. It says like batch completed, couple of like auditing data here, RPC completed, those sort of things. I would like to click on that. To see, I can also edit the SQL query here. I can also do that. And then I can get the results based upon like, and then view the results properly here. What statement did it run? Who is running the statement? And what database, what table, principal name, and all sort of things. What query actually executed? and all sort of things. What is the host name and everything. Just like the way you see the auditing data on-prem, you can see those details here. Now let's see the last option. Last one is data governance, which comes under the data classification. It's all about how you are classifying your data. Like for example, if you have some PII data, very important data like SSNs or like passport numbers, those sort of things, you would like to know if somebody is accessing that data without your knowledge, right? If they if they access that data, you need to get an alert, right? So you can actually divide these data in different categories, classify these data based upon the sensitivity level. So here I would like to choose underneath the security again, underneath the database, security, data discovery and classification. Once I click on that, I would like to click on the schema, table name, column name, um, and then sensitivity level. You can give the sensitivity level highly confidential, confidential, and maybe low confidential. Will have that option as a label. And once you do that, then it will start collecting the data. And by using the data, again, um, you can also see who is actually accessing the data, number of queries executed accessing the data, and you can see the left side screen will show you how many columns have been um, tagged as this sensitivity label and what are they. But then if you see the right side with the green circle, right, those are the number of the queries which actually accessed this data. By clicking on that, you can see this will grab the data from the auditing itself, but then it will give you entire details of like what columns those columns are being accessed. So now I would like to see that data. So you can do that here. So extensions of this session, I have written series of blog posts where you can go ahead and click on this link, or like you can access dbanuggets.com. Underneath the Azure category, you'll find these blogs. And these are the resources that I used to prepare this presentation, to put this together. And I would like to thank you all for being here on Friday evening, learning something new. Or I hope you learned something new today. But if you'd like to contact me, these are the details on the slide. And I would like to thank Suraj one more time for giving me this great opportunity to present here. Thank you.
Thank you, Deepti, for the presentation and taking the time to come here and share your knowledge with everybody. I really appreciate it, and thank you for everyone coming on a Friday, as Deepti said. And yeah, I think there was some question. Deepti, is it okay if we take some of the question? Is
Yeah,
it
yeah, sure.
okay?
Sure. Like if can you ask me the question or do you want me to see the question?
So I'll just ask you. I'll just pick one
Yeah, yeah.
question. How to check with which version of TLS is installed in VM?
Okay. I think the same in um how to check the TLS version. I have shown you in the slide, right? You need to go to that networking blade on the VM. Click on that, and when you click on that, on the I think one of the blade will have this TLS version. Um, I can show you very quick. I think I showed you here, right? What is the TLS version? Where did I? Somewhere here. Somewhere here on the blade I have shown. So once you open up this thing, right? Minimum the TLS version is already chosen. So you to know which one is already enabled, that will be chosen there. So to choose a different one, you need to drop down and click on the latest one.
There
In
is
any more?
Louis who want to ask question. Hey, Louis, I just gave you the access. You should be able to ask the question now. Yeah, I'm trying to because there was another
Hello.
question, the authentication. Okay. Yes, Louis, go ahead.
It's Louis. Can I ask this about the security, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, maybe I'm a newbie. Maybe can I ask you about what kind of remote they're using about Microsoft 365 on Azure? Remote like
Sorry,
TeamViewer. Uh,
Microsoft 365 on Azure. I have no idea about my Microsoft 365. Maybe you have to check with Microsoft 365 people. But this session is basically focused on
yes,
Azure database.
yeah, right. You're right.
So,
You're right. You're right. I'm wrong. Right. Uh, do you have a remote application?
mhm.
What what application do you use for the remote to support?
I think there is some hard to understand. Hey, Louis, it'd be great if you can drop that question in chat box so that we can understand it. So there was another question regarding the authentication. So the authentication and authorization have expiration. Does that have expiration?
Definitely, like, right. If you are choosing like Azure Intra ID authentication, um, you need to work with the Active Directory people, or the security team, not the security team, but the Windows administrators who are actually managing these authorization, right? Authorization where they can actually create these Entra IDs, where they have two options to choose whether the um, couple of options actually, whether the user have to change the password the next time they log in, or like when can these password gets rotated, those sort of things. It can have the expiration. Definitely, you can set it up that way.
I think we are good with the question.
Suraj, is this session recorded?
Yes, the session is recorded.
Good, good. Can you share with me the how many max people attended and the link once it is released on YouTube?
Sure, sure, can do that. Okay, I think we had the question. So if there is any more question, I'll just drop Deepti's. I think Deepti didn't drop her LinkedIn. I'll just directly drop
Yeah,
it.
yeah, please.
Feel free to
Yeah,
connect
please
and
drop it.
follow her.
Mhm.
Follow her. Hey, if you have your community links, feel free to drop that as well. In case anybody who is here wants
Oh,
to check out your
um,
sessions as well.
yeah, yeah. So I can actually I highly encourage people to let me see the chat window, because I would like to share a link so that you can connect to the cloud data driven. Let me just give me a minute, right? Meetup.com. Um, this is a user group. I am also a co-organizer for this user group, and if you see it, like there are 4,000 people every week. We pick uh, we pick up the speakers. We go to them and we'll ask them if they will present to us. So you can go ahead, if you do not have an account, it's free. You can go ahead and register on Meetup, and also let me show you this Azure data tech groups. There are 135 groups across the world, and there are like these many people and across 38 countries. This is all free again. If you see, these are the user groups that we have across the world, and then you can go ahead and search each one by one. Mostly they are the virtual user groups. Once you click on any of these user groups, right, you can go ahead and join the user group. Like for example, Japan SQL Server user group where I spoke here. So just click on join the group here. It will ask you to log in again. I am not the part of that group, but I would like to join. So it will just ask you to join, and then you will be joined. Like it will ask for the final setup. Yeah, you are a member now. So what will happen is you will get the notifications here, right? See, you have these many notifications that you get. Hey, this is the next thing that is coming up. 22 people RSVP'd. If you want to attend, go ahead and just click on like attend. It will pop up here. I already registered, so you can go ahead and click, and then you can just here. And then you, as you guys are in India, right? Mm, you can actually go through the. Sorry, let me see. Uh, Azure SQL groups here. Many people doesn't know this, but I would like to share with you. Like you can search places, cities, and countries. So India, if you click on India, not India. Maybe where are you located?
You'll need to put in the city actually. Like you will have
Yeah,
to.
that is what it is asking. Like maybe Hyderabad. I don't know how many people are there in Hyderabad, how many groups are there in Hyderabad, but see, we don't have any. But here in India, we have this. But as this is basically virtual user group, see, you can register to any number of user groups here, basically. So you check for them and try to register. Very beneficial, highly suggestible, because you are getting all the expert level education for free. Just leverage and take the advantage of it. And then also I'm a part of a couple of user groups here. I can also share this link actually to you guys in the chat window so that you can go ahead and register for that. And also I'm a part of a couple of my groups. So I'm part of all of these user groups here. So yeah. So yeah, I hope everybody enjoyed, and if do not forget to ask me any questions if you have. If you are shy here to ask, just ping me on LinkedIn. I can answer your questions. Okay. So thank you, Suraj. I have to go work. So yeah,
Yes, this is morning for the so yeah.
yeah,
So yeah,
yeah,
I
yeah,
think we took a little bit more time, but I hope
yeah.
everybody was able to understand everything. And thank you everyone for joining as well. I shared all the
Thank you.
link, and Deepthi has also shared all the link. If you check it out, and yeah, that's it. And have a great weekend.
Have a great weekend. Bye.
Bye.